Today we're reading 2 Corinthians chapter 11, and Paul is going to continue on his rant that he started back in chapter 10, and he's speaking against the false apostles who apparently had infiltrated the church in Corinth after he had planted it and was trying to do, a work there to help them to be pursuers of God. He says this to them in verse 4, "You happily put up with whatever anyone tells you." Now he's talking to the Corinthians right now. "Even if they preach a different Jesus than the one we preach, or a different kind of spirit than the one you received, or a different kind of gospel than the one you believed." Now this reminds me of Galatians, when Paul spoke out against the Judaizers in that book. So you can go back and read Galatians again if you want to see how he was explaining that to the church in Galatia probably a few years earlier. He says this in verse 5, "But I don't consider myself inferior in any way to these quote-unquote super apostles who teach such things." You can see a little bit of sarcasm in his tone. He says, "I may be unskilled as a speaker, but I'm not lacking in knowledge. We have made this clear to you in every possible way." So apparently these false teachers said that they were more important than the Apostle Paul. Okay, and so Paul is talking about that. I'll let you read this for yourself, but let's scroll down here to verse 13. He says, "These people are false apostles. They're deceitful workers who disguise themselves as apostles of Christ. But I'm not surprised. Even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light." Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of that term before, that Satan is an angel of light. What that means is he is disguising himself as an angel, and he appears full of light, but really when you listen to his message, his teaching, and this is good for all of us to remember today in our culture, we have to pay attention. Don't be fooled by someone's outward appearance or what they say. Listen to their message, because they might be angels of light. Satan is, and so are these false teachers. And so he says in verse 15, "So it is no wonder that his servants, Satan's servants, also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness, and in the end they will get the punishment that their wicked deeds deserve." Let's scroll down just a little further. He says this, "Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they descendants of Abraham? So am I." So apparently these false teachers were Jewish. Are they servants of Christ? He says this, "I know I sound like a madman, but I have served him far more. I have worked harder, been put in prison more often, been whipped times without number, and faced death again and again." Now again, he believes that they're false teachers, but these are all their claims. They're claiming to be servants of Christ. They're speaking in the name of Jesus, but they're not from Jesus. They're not speaking a message that is approved, or Paul would not be so hard on them, right? So let's scroll just a little further. He says this in verse 28. "Then besides all this," he says, "I have the daily burden of my concern for all the churches." And now he gets real personal here. Paul does. He says, "Who is weak without my feeling that weakness? Who is led astray, and I do not burn with anger?" He says, "If I must boast, I would rather boast about the things that show how weak I am." And so Paul, even though as you read this chapter, you might think he's boasting about his own credentials, he's really not. He's just trying to say, listen, I'm from God. Listen to my message. He has such passion for the people there in Corinth, and he doesn't want them to be led astray so easily by these false teachers. So you're ready to read chapter 11, and we'll see you tomorrow for chapter 12.